What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Your guys, Cody and Derek, back for another episode, guys. Well, the big part of free agency has officially come and gone. First couple weeks are done. About a month away or so from the draft. And obviously, the Colts might make a few more moves here. But as it stands right now, we wanted to kind of rank our moves from least favorite to favorite. Now, these moves could include the Colts bringing back some of their own guys. It also could include the Colts going outside of free agency and bringing in some players. So the Colts actually did a decent amount here in both departments. And so we kind of want to talk about it, rank it from least favorite to our favorite. We're pretty similar in a lot of ways in terms of order. I know we have like one at the top there that we're going to probably disagree on, and we'll kind of have a debate on that. But without further ado, Derek, let's start with our least favorite re-signing or outside signing. Who might that be and why?
Well, I think you start with Carter O'Donnell. I mean, there's just not really a lot to get excited about. Carter O'Donnell really hasn't played, and it just seems like another practice squad get. But that's just really what it is because we don't really have a lot of situations right now with offensive line, and it just reiterates the fact that we need to get more offensive line depth. Because we didn't do that so far through free agency. I mean, this was the only offensive line signing that you have had through all of free agency so far. And, Indianapolis needs to, be more upbeat on this offensive line signings because you neglected it last year and it ruined you. And this year, so far through the first 2 weeks, haven't been able to rewrite the narrative at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's pretty obvious the Colts need probably to address a backup tackle and find another guy in there, with Matt Pryor obviously not coming back. And then, really Carter O'Donnell's like your third tackle right now. So I think that kind of speaks to the importance of getting some depth at that position. I think the Colts need to go out there and address it. But at least they have Carter O'Donnell right now as their third guy. But yeah, you mentioned that he really has not played a whole lot. He's been a practice squad guy. So this is a very kind of whatever signing, it's just more for depth than potentially like a training camp body type of guy, right? So not really anything to write home about there for Carter O'Donnell. But the second guy we want to talk about, he actually contributes a little bit more. He doesn't start, but he plays a good role on special teams, and that's cornerback Tony Brown, right? And I felt like he's been a good special teams player for the Colts the last couple of years. And he's played in spurts, but really, you hope that he doesn't really see the field a whole lot. But I think just for a special teams standpoint, this is a pretty good re-signing for the Colts here to bring back one of their own, a guy that's been in there. And obviously with, the change of special teams coordinators now, they needed all the guys they could have, that were really key parts to this unit. And Tony Brown's one of those guys. What are your thoughts here on the Colts bringing him back?
Yeah, Tony Brown definitely was a practice kind of guy that, when the preseason was around, Tony Brown had a lot of big moments and a couple of bad moments. Kind of had his story go up and down, but he is a young guy. So you look to see maybe with this corner room being very thin, maybe that's the potential for Tony Brown to potentially see some light going forward. Obviously, the Colts are going to address it going forward, but guys like Dallas Flowers and him are guys that are trying to find spots anywhere on the field that they can get. So it'd be cool to see if Tony Brown can do something. But as you said, right now he's mainly just a special teams guy that only gets a few snaps, so there wasn't a huge issue bringing him back.
Yeah, for very cheap. And it was kind of one of those signings where you're like, it's good to have him back, but like it wouldn't have been the end of the world if the Colts didn't bring him back. But, solid special teams player, potentially has some upside at corner. I guess we'll see in the preseason, he did show some things. But I mean, I think you're obviously feel a lot better if he's just on the practice squad or special teams moving forward. So that's kind of the second guy there. Some guys kind of on the fringe of the roster here. Now let's move to another guy here. This is another re-signing for the Colts. And this is a guy, Derek, that a couple of years ago was looking up. He was really looking up. Taekwon Lewis was really looking up in his career, right? He started off kind of slow. He dealt with some injuries. But then, he had a couple good, really good years with the Indianapolis Colts where he was playing, he was starting, he was looking really good at defensive end, right? And then the last 2 years, Taekwon Lewis has suffered back to back really major injuries. And it was kind of a surprise, I think, that the Colts did bring him back, just considering the injuries and the severity of them. But the Colts do bring him back on a very cheap, reasonable 1 year deal. But I think at this point, Derek, you cannot, just like we've said with Paris Campbell last year, you can't rely on Taekwon Lewis to stay healthy. I mean, the proof has been in the pudding the last 2 years where it hasn't played all 17 games, right? That's just what it is, unfortunately. But the Colts do bring him back, a guy that they obviously love. They've raved about Taekwon Lewis, but we have him so low on the list, I think, just because you just have to kind of anticipate that he's going to probably get injured again. Unfortunately, you hope that doesn't happen, but the last 2 years have showed you that. What are your thoughts here on the Colts bringing back Taekwon Lewis and kind of why you think maybe he's so low on your list as well?
Yeah, I mean, Taekwon Lewis, I mean, again, a guy that has had several injury concerns. He had the same problem as what Paris Campbell did for the longest time, which was just having these freak injuries happen, early or midway through the season, and then and it just wasn't working out for him. And obviously, any team that would look at Taekwon Lewis would sit there and say that same thing. Like, you had 2 season-ending injuries. You had another season after your rookie year where you got benched because of, just not being in the right headspace or whatever. So, for half of his career, he has not played. And it sucks in some ways for that. So obviously you were able to bring him back on a pretty much veteran minimum at this point. Is really good to see, him come back and, be able to try and be that depth piece, because he's always been a solid role depth guy for this team. And, even back, I say it, what was it, 2020, when the Indianapolis Colts, I mean, Taekwon Lewis was one of the leading guys in sacks for the team throughout the whole year. That was the year where Indy didn't really get a whole lot of production from its defensive ends, but Taekwon Lewis was one of the more efficient guys at getting there. And then ultimately, the last 2 seasons, he's just had season-ending injuries that it hasn't worked for him. So hopefully he gets back on track, and it's just another role piece. So clearly not going to be a starter, and that's why he's down here.
But you do sign him with the hope that what if he does play all 17 games, right? He can be a nice role defensive end, right? Who can start some games for you, who he's not going to, get double digit sacks. But Taekwon Lewis has always been an efficient guy, a very balanced defensive lineman, right? He's good against the run. He can get after the passer. And if he can be healthy, I think he can be kind of a nice backup guy here to really help this unit. He can play inside, he can play out. He's valuable when he's on the field. The question has just been his availability recently. But if he's available, I think this is obviously his last chance, because the Colts now have extended 2, prove it deals to him. And if he can do it this year, I think he could potentially secure himself a multi-year contract with Indianapolis next year. But it all obviously all depends on, can he stay healthy? That's the big question with Taekwon. If he can, I think he can have a role here. But if not, I mean, I think it's really no skin off the Colts' back. They can move on from him pretty easily next offseason and go in a different direction. But that's Taekwon Lewis for you there. The third guy here in the least category. Moving on to the first outside signing that the Colts made that makes this list, and that is Taven Bryan, defensive lineman. He started out his career with Jacksonville. He was a former first round pick, so there's obviously the talent is there. He did have some starts last year, but Taven Bryan's going to probably be kind of that backup guy, right? He's going to be that backup to DeForest Buckner or Grover Stewart, kind of in that interior. But that's pretty much what he's going to be. So what do you think about Taven Bryan, the Colts bringing him in? We obviously knew that backup defensive interior lineman was a need for the Colts, and the Colts get a guy with, talent here. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, Taven Bryan, again, just another guy that is going to be a depth piece for you. He's going to be that guy that is going to be another run stuffer in the middle, when DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart have to come off the field every once in a while. Bryant has a unique skill set of being like kind of in the middle of what a DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart hybrid would be like. He doesn't have a lot of great moves on the inside, but he is a guy that's a disruptor. You just ask him to run. You just ask him to run through guys, cause some disturbance in the middle of the pocket, which is what the Indianapolis Colts have been trying to consistently get for the last several years. Trying to disrupt some quarterbacks from being able to make throws in a pocket, which definitely helps your defensive ends. He's definitely a guy that's going to be very interesting to watch. But clearly he's got a very good skill set that could really help with a few things. I mean, he's a good balance between a run stopper and a pass rusher. So it's good to have that kind of skill set for a backup guy for that role. So it's nice to see that in there. So hopefully we see more of him going forward.
Yep. Absolutely. I think he's a solid guy in there that can provide some quality minutes, can kind of be what Taylor Stallworth was a couple of years ago for you, and maybe even then some, because he's obviously a former high round pick. He's had some more experience than a Taylor Stallworth did. And so I do think he could fill a really nice role there as kind of that first guy off the bench in the interior there. So yeah, I definitely think that was a solid signing for the Colts. Let's move on now to another guy the Colts brought back at the wide receiver position, Ashton Dulin. He kind of had some injuries last year, but he started to show some things as a receiver, Derek, the last couple of years. He hasn't really got much of an opportunity, and obviously with the Colts and how bad they were last year at passing the football, I felt like he just didn't get his fair shake yet at maybe getting some looks at wide receiver. We all know what he can do on special teams, one of the best special teams guys in the NFL. But Ashton Dulin as a receiver, maybe he is kind of penciled in right now as that number 4 wide receiver. Obviously, his prowess on special teams brings him up on this list. What are your thoughts on the Colts bringing back Ashton Dulin and kind of the impact that makes here on their wide receivers?
Yeah, Ashton Dulin definitely has been brought back, and what we presume is going to be an extended role, right? We know that the Indianapolis Colts did not re-sign Paris Campbell, but indeed re-signed Ashton Dulin. And it seems like that happens like every single year is a wide receiver on the team needs to be re-signed or can be re-signed, and nobody does because Ashton Dulin needs to be brought back on a 1-year deal every year because not only is he have the ability to play wide receiver, but again, what he provides you on special teams is so important. He's a guy that's your main gunner. He's a guy that, for many years has led your team in special teams tackles. So there's a lot of, and even led the league in special teams tackles in 2021, if I'm not mistaken. So there's just a lot of reasons to want to have a multi-purpose guy like Ashton Dulin on your team. So it makes a lot of sense. I'm glad that they did bring him back. It definitely does not really fix the issue with the wide receiver. I still think the Colts need to try to find somebody else, and we're going to talk about another wide receiver that we just got as well. But Ashton Dulin, having one of those special teams guys back and probably one of your biggest ones, that is totally worth bringing Ashton Dulin back.
Yep, absolutely. Worth bringing him back because he has that versatility at wide receiver that we love Paris Campbell, but Paris Campbell never played special teams. But Ashton Dulin does that. He does some of the dirty work that I think makes him more valuable. That he kind of plays 2 positions, if you will, and that's really critical to have, right? We talk about all the time the versatility on the offensive defensive line. But how about the versatility at like some of those wide receiver cornerbacks, DBs that can play a little bit of everything? That's definitely huge. So Ashton Dulin, he's not, ever going to be, a great receiver, but I think he's always been a solid receiver, and he's got speed to boot, which definitely helps. And I just think that definitely helps with the Colts. And we'll see what his role looks like here with the team. Maybe he is just more of a special teams guy moving forward. Maybe he does get more of a look this offseason or this next season. We'll see exactly what happens with that. But you talked about the other guy, a guy the Colts brought in to kind of, not be Paris Campbell replacement, but kind of fill a similar role in the slot. That's Isaiah McKenzie, formerly of the Buffalo Bills last year. He is a guy that's very interesting, Derek, because he is that smaller frame, but he's got that elite speed that you're looking for, right? He's 27 years old. He actually just came off of a career year with the Buffalo Bills, where he had 42 catches for 423 yards and 4 touchdowns. And so McKenzie seems like a guy that's very versatile, a guy that's kind of an ascending player, right? He was always that third wide receiver in the Buffalo system. And it just kind of felt like, his first couple of years, he really just didn't get a whole lot of looks. And then this last year, he got a lot more looks, and he actually played pretty well. Now, he doesn't have, he does have warts. He does have some drop issues. He's had some issues in the past. But Isaiah McKenzie offers you something a little bit different at wide receiver than maybe you have on your roster besides him. So what are your thoughts here on the Colts bringing out Isaiah McKenzie as kind of that slot number 3 wide receiver as it currently stands?
Yeah, Isaiah McKenzie's definitely an interesting one. Another guy that is like an Ashton Dulin. He can play special teams. He can be a returner for you because Isaiah McKenzie and his skill set, he is a very agile, very quick guy that can accelerate, and he's great for punt returns. You lost Naheem Hines this last year, so you're still looking for a guy to fully work with you on that. So Isaiah McKenzie being your punt returner, and him and Dallas Flowers being your kick returners from here on out seems like a very great idea for that aspect. Yeah, Isaiah McKenzie is very interesting. He is, like you said, he's a lot like a Paris Campbell. He's not quite the same body build, but that's really what a lot of his role is a guy that is fast. He's quick. He's a guy that if you know how to get him open, he can be open and can make plays with his feet afterwards because he's a very quick guy. So, again, the drop issues, I've seen people make the joke, he'll fit right in Indianapolis if that's the case. We've seen that joke, but I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of times drops a lot of times can be accumulated to confidence and also just lack of focus. And from what we heard from Shane Steichen is that if it's any indication of him saying we want to perfect our craft, then I would expect that to not be as big of an issue going forward. Isaiah McKenzie's always been a relatively decent guy in the Buffalo locker room when you're wanting to look at some of the things that he does. And I mean, he had a great season last year. I mean, 42 receptions, 423 yards, 4 touchdowns. Didn't play in all of the games last year, but he is a guy that can get you plays. And he did have 9 rushes last year for 55 yards and a touchdown in there as well. So he's showing you there as well. What the Colts sometimes did with Paris Campbell last year, Isaiah McKenzie can do the same thing for you in that regard. So I like McKenzie. I don't think he's the solution to what we need to fix. We still need a big one. But in regards to actually, doing what's needed to be done to fill out that roster and get that gadget player again that McKenzie can be, it was a really good deal, and I'm glad to have Isaiah McKenzie here.
Well, you talk about, we all know it was well documented how bad the Colts struggled last year in the red zone, and then obviously their wide receivers in separation. Well, Isaiah McKenzie actually comes in as one of the best wide receivers in football in terms of separation, right? He had 3.3 yards of separation per route run in 2022. Just for comparison, the 2 other wide receivers, Michael Pittman had a 2.7 and Alec Pierce had a 1.9. And so, like, with the Colts struggling in the red zone last year, it'll be interesting to see how a guy like McKenzie maybe helps to solve that issue a little bit more, and how valuable that can be. He had 10 red zone touchdowns the last 3 years with Buffalo. And I just think he's a guy that the Colts could use in a lot of different packages and a lot of different ways to really become better in that department next year. So I'm really excited for that. He's just a guy that brings you a little bit of a different kind of wide receiver in terms of separation. And that's something obviously that we hope that Pittman and especially Alec Pierce is going to get better at as he gets older and, as he learns and grows into his second year. But McKenzie certainly brings that different aspect that kind of Paris Campbell brought as well. That speed and that separation that the wide receivers desperately needed last year for the Colts. So I think it definitely is a really good signing for the Colts. But obviously, the Colts signed him on a pretty low deal, which I think was good for them. But yeah, we'll see exactly what his role looks like and how much he sees the field this next year. And, is he the wide receiver 3 or do the Colts go and draft somebody and maybe he's wide receiver 4? I don't know. But I think they're going to be able to use him regardless, Shane Steichen and whatever quarterback they have. They're going to be able to find ways to just get him the football. And I think that's just going to help this offense and help presumably a rookie quarterback out a whole lot. It's going to be their best friend to just throw a screen pass and let the guy go to work, right? So Isaiah McKenzie up here on this list. Now let's go to another guy the Colts did re-sign. That is EJ Speed. With Bobby Okereke leaving to go to the New York Giants in free agency, I think the urgency of bringing back EJ Speed was even more, and the Colts got him done and brought him back on a multi-year deal, which I thought was pretty reasonable, all things considered. Give me your thoughts on EJ Speed being brought back as the kind of the third linebacker in this system.
I agree with you. I thought that the reason why EJ Speed is up here with this group right here is not the fact of how much EJ Speed has played, but the importance of the position and where they needed to re-sign him. It was so important to have him back because, like you said, losing a starter in Bobby Okereke, and if you were going to lose EJ Speed too, then now you have a serious issue of who's going to be that third linebacker. Now, Indianapolis has had a lot of linebackers this last offseason, Cody. We were talking about JoJo Doman and a few other guys that, could potentially sneak their way in, which definitely could still potentially happen. Maybe the Indianapolis Colts don't address linebacker anymore and they just run with the 3 guys that they have and feel confident that whoever is on their practice squad could probably come in and still steal a few snaps. Maybe that is a thing. But it's only because you brought EJ Speed back, because now you feel confident in that EJ Speed, who could have probably gone somewhere and maybe gotten a certified backup role for about the same kind of money, but would have had a chance to maybe explode more into the scene versus with a team that didn't have a bona fide true top 2 linebackers. That could have been a role that he might have been able to go into, but he decided to stick around and know that he's still going to get his snaps. He's going to increase his snaps. And then once this contract's up for him, then he's going to start saying, okay, then I can start testing my luck somewhere else with somebody else. We'll see how these next 2 years go with him. But it was very important because, the few snaps that we did see from EJ Speed over the last several years with Indianapolis, he has really done a fantastic job of coming in and filling that role. We saw in the Arizona game, had led the team in tackles in that game where they won against Arizona to keep their playoff hopes alive. This last season's had a lot of times where he's had to step into some games with the injury to Shaquille Leonard. And on top of it, you saw he's always been a special teams guy too. And he's had multiple touchdowns through special teams scores. So, this is a guy that's very important. A lot of people may not recognize him because he's not a starter, but you pay attention to who's scoring and who's coming in at these times. EJ Speed is a very different kind of player too. His skill set, his size, he's just very different build than what your typical linebacker is. So I'm happy to have him back. I'm excited. I'm glad that that was one of the first thing the Colts did was ensure to keep him around. So happy to see it. And the Colts linebacker unit is going to remain intact for the next few years to come, I hope.
Yeah, and obviously we all think that Shaquille Leonard is going to be 100%, but again, you don't know that, right? So it's nice to have some insurance there as well. Like, you do feel confident, okay, if Shaquille's still not where he is to be, needs to be, you have EJ who can step in and can play a really good role. He's, with the increased snaps, I think he'll only just continue to get better. So you do feel like obviously that's a worst case scenario, but like, okay, yeah, like we have a guy that knows the system well, will play well, and we're not relying on an undrafted rookie last year, right, to step in. And there's obviously going to be a drop. But with DJ Speed, the drop's a little bit less in that way. And so, yeah, you're right. He plays special teams. He does a lot for you. He's going to get more snaps as that third linebacker in the system. And I just think it was a good all-around deal for EJ getting more look at linebacker, and then just for the Colts to get a guy that can, knows the system well and can play special teams. And it obviously does a great job on that as well. So, all right, cool. We have three more guys we're going to talk about here. Interesting enough, we have differences here in these three guys. So these are the differences. I guess really only in the top two, but the number 3 guy, Derek, is Matt Gay, the kicker that the Colts signed. The biggest surprise, I think, outside free agency. Yeah. We were not expecting the Colts to go in a different direction than Chase McLaughlin, but Colts elect to go with Matt Gay, who is, late 20s, but has been one of the most accurate kickers in the NFL the last couple of years. And obviously it's a kicker, and I know some people won't like that a kicker is this high, but Derek, the Colts got a darn good kicker in Matt Gay.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, is a great signing looking at it, hindsight. Like you said, it was a big shock for everyone that the Colts went this route because, like you said, Chase McLaughlin this last year was money last year, won several games for the Indianapolis Colts last year. And you're sitting there thinking, well, why not just re-sign that guy? It definitely wouldn't have cost that much. And I almost do feel bad for Chase McLaughlin because, the amount of years that guy's been trying to find a stable home. I mean, he has not been, I know he's still a young guy. He's only 26. So he's not very old, but he has had a different team. He's been on a different team several times already in the span of a 4-year career for this right now. So it's kind of weird just seeing him jump from team to team to team to team like that, especially for a guy that's, not a bad kicker. And even this last year, hopefully some team signs him, realizes how good he was, and then, decides to give him another shot. Who knows? But yeah, it was good to see Matt Gay come in, who, this last few years has just been automatic. I mean, just hasn't missed much of anything. He's one of the best kickers. He's definitely one of the best kickers, probably behind Justin Tucker from a percentage standpoint. Matt Gay over the last 2 years has been the best kicker in the NFL. So, I mean, you don't get much better than this guy. And the Indianapolis Colts were saying, we've lost so many games over the last several years from our kickers just not being good. It's time for us to just make sure we get the one and we don't have to worry about it for several years. So, I mean, it's a good signing. Now makes your special teams unit one of the best in the NFL, along with the fact that you're getting Rigoberto Sanchez back. So I'm all for Matt Gay coming in here. People were asking if the price was too much. At the end of the day, it's just it's making sure that you have your kicker going.
Yep. Well, just for reference, over the last 2 seasons, Matt Gay, he's attempted 64 field goals. He's made 60 of them. So that's nearly 94% of field goals over the last 2 seasons that Matt Gay has made. So he's been like one of, if not the best kicker over the last 2 seasons. And the Colts lock him in for 4 years. And I think that's just important, right? Chase McLaughlin, I do think if Matt Gay was not available, the Colts would have just rolled with Chase McLaughlin for another year. But rarely does a kicker of that pedigree become available. So I get why the Colts went after him, because that's been one of their biggest concerns for so long. You talked about it. How many games the Colts lost or would have had a chance in if they just had a kicker that they could rely on, right? And games are won and lost all the time between good kicking and bad kicking. And the Colts got a good kicker now. And I do think about it, Derek, if Rigoberto comes back and is the punter that we all know he can be and has been, I really do feel like the Colts have the best special teams unit in the NFL. I really do feel like that because they have so many guys that have been top at their positions, right? Dallas Flowers was the leading kick returner in terms of yards per kick return last year. Isaiah McKenzie, obviously, we know what he can do. And then, now you get the kicker has been kind of the big issue for the Colts the last couple of years. And now they seemingly have that figured out. So, yeah, I do think even though it is a kicker, a lot of people don't like that. The Colts got one of the best ones. So he definitely deserves to be in the top 3. Now here, Derek, is where we're going to differ a little bit. We're going to vary in terms of our 2 and 1. Why don't you go ahead and tell me your number 2 and number 1 favorite guys here the Colts brought in or re-signed?
All right. Number 2 for me would be Samson Ebukam. I'm gonna have him there just because it's a great signing for the price that you have. He's gonna be a guy that's gonna be filling in that role of Yannick Ngakoue not coming back. So really awesome to have him in there and provide some hopefully some production that the Colts really are looking for in a solid and consistent production standpoint from the opposite edge. Seen a lot of film from Zach Hicks putting it out on Twitter, seeing a lot of those of where he is very close to sacks, but either gets held or just ends up just missing. But, it's kind of those situations where it's awesome where you're going to see a guy who has a good skill set and, is coming there and wanting to do a certain thing. So hopefully that turns out to be a good investment for them. I think number 1 for me has got to be Gardner Minshew. And I know a lot of people are going to find that crazy, but I look at it from this standpoint that the Indianapolis Colts, when it comes to Ebukam and Minshew, why is number 1 or number 2, or whoever you might have as the best signing. The Colts had several different areas where they had a backup plan in case they didn't get that guy. The Colts don't have a backup plan before they got Gardner Minshew. You released Matt Ryan. You presume at some point they're going to release Nick Foles. I mean, it's just kind of one of those situations where the Colts didn't have a reliable backup going forward. They didn't have an option. So Gardner Minshew coming in was the best backup plan for the Indianapolis Colts because of Gardner Minshew's past, who has been a guy that has been able to win games as a starter in the league and played with Shane Steichen. He understands Shane Steichen and how his system works. So it's important to have had a guy at a premium position that is going to be a good backup to whoever you bring in as the starter at quarterback position for 2023. So that's why I have him at number 1, just due to the importance of the actual signing of being the backup behind everything else.
Okay. Well, I'm going to counter that. And this is why I'm going to say Ebukam for me is 1 and Gardner is 2. Number 1, pass rush is also a premium position for sure. And Gardner, I get that. Like, yeah, he's great. Obviously I'm love to have him. And that really helps, if you go with Anthony Richardson. He doesn't have to start right away. You want him to, but you have faith and confidence that Gardner can kind of right the ship for a little bit. And obviously he's been around the league a little bit, so he can help teach that and mentor that young quarterback. So I think that's definitely important to have a really good backup. But for me, with how much you've struggled to have consistent pressure at pass rush, at edge, right, which we know that's one of the core philosophies to winning and being really good in the NFL is you have to get after the quarterback. You have to be able to do that. And the Colts, somehow upgraded from a 9.5 sack guy when they signed Ebukam in favor of Yannick Ngakoue, right? It's crazy, Derek, because just like Isaiah McKenzie, Ebukam is coming off his best season as a pro as well. The Colts signed him in a 3-year deal, and I really do feel like he is just on the brink of breaking out, right? Last season, his best season, he had, he talked about career high in sacks and 5, which people look at that like 5 sacks. Why are you so excited about that? Well, then you also look at some of the quarterback hits, the tackles for loss, and the pressures. Derek, he had a better pass rush win rate than Yannick Ngakoue, whose specialty is pass rush win rate, right? His specialty is pass rush. And he had, in less snaps, he was more effective than Yannick Ngakoue. And he can play really solid against the run as well, right? It's not like, okay, he's going to be really good at pass rushing, but he's not going to be able to stop anybody, right? He can actually do that, right? Where Yannick could not. He was, I think, the worst run defender at the edge position last year. So the Colts upgrade at a premium position for a guy. They lock him in for 3 years. And now you have some options with what you can do with Dayo Odeyingbo, right? Dayo doesn't have that pressure of coming in and being the starter. And you have like 3, you think, quality defensive linemen that, are on the brink of breakout. Like, I really do think Ebukam is there, Derek. I really do. And I know that people look at stats and they don't really see it. But I think stats in this case, Derek, are very misleading when it comes to Ebukam. I really do think he is on the brink of maybe, a 7, 8, 9 sack season. I really do think if he could just get home a couple more times and last year, if some other scenarios happened, I really do think we're talking and we're looking at it a lot more of a positive light if the sack numbers are up a little bit, right? But everything else is there. So for me, Ebukam goes to 1 just because he is going to be a starter. He is a premium position, and I think he's on the brink of a breakout season. But I understand totally, and I totally agree with you. The importance of a backup quarterback is so critical. At the end of the day, you hope that he's the backup. And for that reason, I have to go with the guy who is going to have an immediate impact. There's no question over a guy that will kind of be that backup, hopefully, and maybe we'll play some games. But definitely are both important. I just think, for me, edge rush is one of those that you've consistently not had, and Ebukam could potentially provide that in a really good way. So that's just my opinion on it.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it all depends on, how much production does Ebukam actually provide you.
Right.
That's going to be the big aspect, is what does it actually provide you going forward? Is it just going to be another situation where, because right now you have Kwity Paye and then Dayo Odeyingbo hoping to make an assertive role into something. It's just all about who's going to end up being that number 1 guy on the outside edge. Is Kwity Paye going to actually stay healthy long enough to be able to put together a 10-sack season? Or is Ebukam, like you said, going to be able to finally tap in to that potential and be that guy? Who knows? I mean, It's just at the end of the day going to be very fun to watch, though.
Yeah, I'm intrigued because, call me crazy, Derek, but I think, and I'm not saying this is going to happen for sure, but I think the Colts do have 2 defensive linemen who do have that potential to push the 10 sack limit. And I haven't said that a lot, right? We haven't said that a lot in terms of defensive linemen the Colts have had, but I really do think they do have those guys, right? I do think they have guys. Not saying it's going to happen. Maybe it doesn't, but I think the potential is there. And that would go a long way for this pass rush that has been very hit and miss. To get a guy that's been productive and is coming off a productive year, for me, it makes a lot of sense. And I'm really excited to see what he does in more of an extended role here with the Colts and kind of being their primary pass rusher, and how him and maybe Kwity kind of, complement each other in a way. And then who knows what Dayo's going to do? He came on strong at times last year. So really excited about this young defensive line group. And I think Ebukam's just kind of that vet piece that you needed. And I think he was one of the best options out there at pass rusher for the Colts to go after. So yeah, I think that does it here for our list of the guys the Colts brought into the building, whether they brought them back or whether they brought them from the outside into the organization. Guys, let us know your thoughts on all these players. Who is your least favorite signing? Who's your favorite signing? Where would you rank all these guys? Let us know all these things in the comments below. I'm really interested to hear what you guys have to say about it. But that will do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Really appreciate all your support. You guys are incredible. You guys obviously make everything happen. And guys, really excited because the draft is upon us. It's coming very, very quickly. So we're going to have a lot of draft content coming out. And then obviously, I think the plan, Derek, is for us to get together again this year. Obviously, we weren't able to do it last year, but really excited that we're able to kind of have a couple days there where we're going to be together and just kind of give our reactions to all the Colts picks. And now the Colts actually have a high pick, so we're not going to have to wait very long for the Colts to do it. And, it was so much fun, man. A couple of years ago when we did that and just had, like a live draft party and people came in and just hung out with us. And that was just so much fun. So really looking forward to doing that again. And it's going to be a great time, and hope you guys will join us for that here coming up here in the end of April. So thanks, guys, for tuning in. Really appreciate all the support. And as always, guys, go Colts.